Hello, my name is Candace Fox, and this is a pre-recorded presentation for the 2020 meeting of the Society for Mathematical Psychology. The title of our poster is Using Cognitive Diagnostic Modeling to Investigate Learning Taxonomy Assumptions. In this study, we use the cognitive process dimension of Bloom's Revised Taxonomy, or BRT, to guide the modeling of cognitive processing on a graded assessment. The cognitive process dimension of BRT is a way of representing a hierarchical relationship between cognitive process skills for the purpose of designing learning and assessment. It is widely used for instructional design, which makes it a good starting point for investigating cognitive processing using assessment data. A cognitive diagnostic model, or CDM, predicts the probability of a correct response to a question in terms of question-specific parameters and student-specific latent skills. In our study, we used a cognitive diagnostic model to investigate three categories of latent cognitive processing skills associated with the understanding level of BRT. These were classifying and comparing, inferring and interpreting, and explaining. Our data consisted of multiple choice exam results from 2 exams given to a class of undergraduate social psychology students at the University of Texas at Dallas. These exams were administered on a computer, and while all students were tested on the same learning objectives, no 2 students had the same set of questions on either exam. For exam 1, we included items with between 3 and 12 student responses, and the average number of responses per item on exam 1 was 7. For exam 2, we included items with between 2 and 14 student responses, and the average number of responses per item on exam 2 was 9. Exam 2 had more questions than exam 1, 44 versus 33 respectively, but both exams included approximately the same number of examinees. We used a non-compensatory deterministic input noisy AND gate model, or DINA model CDM, with maximum likelihood estimation. This model calculated guess and slip parameters of the items from estimated student mastery of latent skills given student responses. We selected a non-compensatory model because this allowed us to represent the BRT assumption of the co-occurrence of a common shared latent skill, such as remembering, for each cognitive process skill of interest. The Q matrices for each exam were annotated by searching exam items for keywords representative of cognitive process category. Classifying and comparing questions asked the student to select an answer addressing the word which. Inferring and interpreting questions asked the student to select an answer addressing the word would. And explaining questions asked the student to select an answer addressing the word why. Redacted examples of these questions are included in the rigid Bloom's model figure on the screen. Each model was tested against a baseline exclusive resources model, which assumed that each item corresponded only to a single category of latent skills. These are represented in the column headings of the Q matrices, with classifying and comparing corresponding to the letter C, inferring and interpreting represented here by I, and explaining represented here by E. Subsequent analyses tested variations on the rigid Bloom's model against the baseline. These included a flexible, robust model which kept the 3 cognitive process categories distinct, but assumed I skills were present whenever E skills were, and C skills were present whenever I skills were. Also tested was a flexible Bloom's pooled model, which assumed that explaining was best modeled as distinct from the other 2 categories. We assessed model fit by computing the Bayesian information criterion for each model on each exam, and then using these values to calculate Bayes factors, using the exclusive resources model as baseline. The results are displayed on the screen. We found that a model with a rigid interpretation of BRT, one in which a common shared resource is required for other cognitive processing skills, provided a poor fit to student response data relative to the baseline. A more probable model was the flexible Bloom's robust model, which assumed subsets of skills best describe cognitive processing on the graded assessments. The most probable model, the flexible Bloom's pooled, suggested that explaining should be modeled independently of other cognitive processing skills on a graded assessment. When evaluating students, instructors may want to understand not only what students know, but which cognitive processes they can employ to represent the information. We have used BRT as a guide for testing cognitive processing on exams. The results presented here should be investigated further, as the BICs fell within the range of standard errors for FBR and FBP models.